I would like to introduce the inspiration for this roundtable on Inuit traditional knowledge. Provost and Vice Principal of Mcgill University, Christopher Manfredi, and architect Isabelle Laurier. Provost Manfredi is instrumental in advancing Indigenous knowledge and studies at Mcgill University, which has led him to work very closely with Isabelle Laurier on a unique endeavor to showcase Inuit contemporary art and its relationship to Western science, and to make this into a very special traveling exhibit. Isabelle Laurier is a multi-talented Montreal architect who worked very closely with contemporary Inuit artists to achieve this unique permanent installation and exhibit. Their enthusiasm and commitment to advance Inuit knowledge and include it in mainstream Western research and science inspired me to organize this roundtable. Thank you so much, Provost Manfredi and Isabelle Laurier. Welcome to the screen.
Well, thank you very much, Marianne. I hope I've unmuted myself and you can hear me well. So it's a pleasure for me to be here today, and thank you for being so gracious and indicating that Isabelle and I inspired you, but you're an inspiration to us. I'm happy to be the amuse-bouche to Isabelle's main course presentation about her terrific project. But what I wanted to do was to ground my presentation in the path towards reconciliation that Canadians have been on for several years, and that Canadian universities have been undergoing as well with great enthusiasm, McGill University included. And in particularly, I wanted to focus on how reconciliation can be achieved through physical representation and symbolic recognition, because I think that's relevant to what you're going to see from Isabelle in a few minutes. If I can get my, of course, we always recognize the land on which McGill University is located, which is Indigenous land, first settled by Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. And of course, we acknowledge and thank them for having conserved that land and marking the territory on which peoples of the world now gather from throughout the world. The story is actually grounded in Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was modeled after the South African Truth and Reconciliation Commissions following apartheid, and was designed to understand, tell the truth about, and recognize the impact of the residential school system, which I think is an important scar on the history of Canada, and one that we need to reckon with. The TRC was active from 2007 to 2015, had a fairly large budget. It heard from over 6,500 witnesses to those activities, and it issued 94 calls to action to Canadians, Canadian governments, and Canadian institutions to try to deal with the damage that the residential school systems had. As you can see from these headlines that are popping up, Canadian universities embraced those calls to action in the TRC Commission's report that dealt with education. And these are a number of statements from 2018 about what universities did. The TRC report came out in early 2016 or 2017. Sorry. McGill University, like all Canadian universities, also embraced the calls to action, but it's not the case that we were unconcerned with our relationships to Indigenous peoples, particularly those in the communities surrounding Montreal. For example, we have for a very long time recognized Indigenous graduates of our university through a special ceremony and through special scarves that they are given when they graduate and that they are entitled to wear at any and all future university events. And also by recognizing distinguished Indigenous Canadians who have excelled in their areas. There's a photo, at least on my screen, it's the photo on the left with Principal Suzanne Fortier and I recognizing Indigenous graduates along with 2 honorary doctorate recipients from that year, Douglas Cardinal, the great architect, and Alanis Ababjuan, the great filmmaker, who both received honorary doctorates. And they were gracious enough to stay for an extra day to celebrate with the other Indigenous graduates or other Indigenous graduates at Mcgill. We've also held a powwow on our downtown campus for several years. And so these are just 2 ways in which we have been engaged with Indigenous communities for a very long time, but obviously the activities around the TRC Commission's reports encouraged us to get even more engaged. In 2016, I launched the Provost Task Force on Indigenous Studies and Indigenous Education to set out Mcgill's own calls to action with respect to reconciliation. This is the emblem that was designed by Marcy Miracle, who's a graduate of Mcgill, BSc 2015, a member of the Wolf Clan, the Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory. I think it's a very striking image. It's modern, so the modern nature of the design combined with the traditional imagery is intentional by Marcy to recognize that Indigenous culture has not been left behind in history, but is constantly evolving and growing in the contemporary world. And I won't go into the details of each component, but each component of the emblem it speaks to ongoing efforts to redress the historical legacies of injustice and explore and restore relationships with Indigenous peoples. That task force set 5 priorities for Mcgill's reconciliation efforts. You can see them all on the screen now. The one I want to talk about today is the one around physical representation and symbolic recognition. Of course, we are engaged in increasing the number of students, Indigenous students at the university. We're engaged in a strategic hiring initiative for Indigenous faculty, which has so far been very, very successful. And of course, we're looking at our academic programs and curriculum, including making our Indigenous studies program more robust. And we've been very fortunate in receiving a fairly large grant from the Mellon Foundation to support our work in Indigenous studies, particularly around Indigenous languages is very important for us. But I want to spend the rest of my time today speaking about that last priority, which is about physical representation and symbolic recognition. I have within my office an Indigenous Initiatives unit. It is tasked with following through on our various commitments in the Provost Task Force. And you just see here a list of some of the things that are connected to our efforts to pursue reconciliation through physical representation. And I'm going to speak about a few of those in a couple of minutes. And some of them actually predate the task force because they were items that had been brought to our attention by our Indigenous community even before we launched the task force. The first one I want to talk about is relocation of the Ashalaga Rock. The Ashalaga Rock is a monument that marks the fact that Mcgill's downtown campus is at a location on which many people believe the Iroquois village of Ashalaga is located, the village where Jacques Cartier first encountered Indigenous peoples when he came from Europe. And for a very long time, that rock was, that monument, which was put there in 1925, was in a very obscure part of our downtown campus. Very few people knew that it was there, very few people saw it. And so one of our first moves towards reconciliation, even before we launched the task force, was to move the rock, to relocate it to a much more prominent location along the main entrance to our campus. So you can see in this slide the rock in its old location, and the work being done to establish it at its new location in a more prominent place. And that prominent place, as I said, is on the main entrance to campus. It's in fact right across from a statue of James Mcgill, whose gift of land and money made the university possible. And it's from that location where I launched the Provost Task Force. So we dedicated the new location of the Ashalaga Rock and launched the Provost Task Force at the same time. And it's also at that location where I received the report of the Provost Task Force in 2017. So that rock has, that relocated Ashalaga Rock marking the village, the location of the village of Ashalaga, is, I think, it's a physical representation of our connection to Indigenous people, but it's also a symbolic recognition of the importance of Indigenous people to the university and its location. A second thing that we did recently in 2018, June 2018, we raised the Hiawatha Wampum Belt flag over our main building, the Arts Building. Normally, there's only two flags that have ever flown above that building. One is the Mcgill University flag, which you see in this slide, but also when the Governor General of Canada is on campus, the Governor General's flag flies over the in that location. Those are the only two flags that have ever flown there. And in June 2018, on what you can see was a beautiful summer day, we raised the Hiawatha Wampum Belt flag again as recognition of the location that Mcgill University has. And it was accompanied by a ceremony that is Mama Bear, an elder who often presides at Mcgill ceremonies, including our convocation ceremonies. And you have a photo there of the Wampum Belt flag flying above our main building, as well as a nice quote from Mike Loft, who's a retired faculty member from our School of Social Work and a member of the Mohawk community in Kahnawake. And Mike is someone from whom I've learned a lot about indigeneity and about the local Indigenous community. And Mike was instrumental in both the persuading us to relocate the Ashalaga Rock and in ensuring that the Hiawatha Wampum Belt flag is raised twice a year on National Indigenous Peoples Day, as well as during our powwow in the fall. We have some other interesting opportunities to enhance reconciliation through physical representation. And largely two things that I want to speak about. One is that we are engaged in a master plan of our campuses. We have three campuses in Montreal, actually. We have our downtown campus. We have a campus at McDonald College in St. Anne de Bellevue. And we have a third campus on the Galt Estate on Mont Saint-Hilaire. So we have those three campuses. We have a master plan for the development of all of those campuses. And the master plan very consciously is incorporating Indigenous elements into it. And some of those Indigenous elements, such as elevating the status and the importance of Ashalaga Rock, we've already achieved, but a lot of it is around landscaping and other kinds of the use of art, naming of buildings, giving greater visibility to our First Peoples House, and so on, and providing spaces for ceremonial activities and so on. So this is a very much a conscious and important element of Mcgill's master plan, and so we're seeking reconciliation through the development of the master plan. The other opportunity we have is that we are in the process of developing a plan for the redevelopment of an old hospital site that's right behind our main downtown campus. It's the site of the Royal Victoria Hospital, which was moved to a new location when a new what's called a super hospital was built. And you can see on this slide that one of the important principles of the development of that site is to recognize its Indigenous history. And so that's becoming a very important part of the work that we're doing what we call the new EVOQ project. And just so those of you who aren't familiar with Montreal, or maybe if you even are familiar with Montreal, this is the site that's being developed. It's on the slope of Mount Royal, so it's a very important site. It's a fairly large site, around 500,000 square feet. It's right behind our downtown campus, and you see it in photos here. The site that's being developed is the 19th century buildings in the foreground, and some buildings from the 1940s that were built in the 1940s to the 1990s that would be demolished and rebuilt. And the fact that the Mcgill is a 19th century campus makes this project, the project of reconciliation through physical representation and symbolic recognition, I think both a challenge and also very interesting. Of course, when you have 19th century buildings, doing any kind of physical changes to them that would allow us to incorporate Indigenous elements is a challenge. But also as 19th century buildings, they are in themselves symbols of the very colonialization that reconciliation is meant to address. So to me, it's a very interesting and important challenge that we're working through. And fortunately, we don't have to work in a vacuum. We have examples of work that's been done at other Canadian institutions. This is from Thompson Rivers University, a classroom, and this is from Red River College. So there are lots of good examples we can use of how other Canadian post-secondary institutions have incorporated Indigenous design into their buildings. And this is the kind of work that we're seeking to do with the new EVOQ project. And we've developed a number of principles for engaging with Indigenous communities in this endeavor. So we're very excited about the project generally, but of course we're very excited about the opportunities that project gives us to further reconciliation through physical representation and the symbolic recognition. And that brings me to the last part of my presentation, which is, I suppose, most relevant and I think falls on from Lars's presentation, which is about Mcgill in the North, about Mcgill re-engaging in the North. The North has traditionally been important for Mcgill, but is in this process of reconciliation, we are seeking to re-engage with it. And there are a number of different reasons for that. One is Mcgill has a critical responsibility towards the North. Each of the 4 medical schools in Quebec are assigned a region for the delivery of health and social services. And the region that Mcgill is assigned, which encompasses 63% of Quebec's territory, includes much of northern Quebec. So we have assigned to us a tremendous responsibility for delivering health and social services in northern Quebec. And so we think that gives us a new impetus for engagement with the North. We also have very important research activities in the North. We have 2 research stations. We have a subarctic research station in Schefferville, Quebec, which operates year-round. But we also have an Arctic research station in the high Arctic in Axel Heiberg Island in Nunavut, which is at somewhere between 79 and 80 degrees north. So we've had these ongoing research activities in the North, and it's something for us with which we should be re-engaging. And it's very important for us to develop an even more robust Northern strategy. And that brings me to this partnership that we've developed to celebrate Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit, which is to look at the art as the bridge between traditional knowledge and modern scientific research. And that's what I'm going to be turning over to Isabelle to speak to you more about. But I just want to give you a little bit of the story. The Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit project, or IQ, just to make it easier, is a Canadian traveling exhibition of Inuit artwork whose origin lies in a national competition to solicit Inuit art for incorporation into the Canadian High Arctic Research Station. And you're going to hear a lot about that from Isabelle. It's a partnership among EVOQ Architects, Mcgill, Polar Knowledge Canada, La Guilde, and Terre en Vue. And the exhibition actually tells 3 separate compelling stories, if you get a chance to see it, and we hope you will. It obviously tells the story about the design and construction of a world-class scientific research facility, and I think this is quite relevant to the presentation we just had speaking about the importance of research in the North. It's also related to what I've been talking about a little bit, which is the use of art to recognize the enduring importance of traditional knowledge and to promote reconciliation by grounding the CHAR's facility in the reality of its local Indigenous community. And finally, it tells a really important and compelling story about the process of selecting the artists for that project. And so, in fact, the whole exhibition is a concrete example of Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit at work. And I think with that, I will turn it over to Isabelle, who will tell you that compelling story or stories. So with that, let me turn it over to Isabelle. All good.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Christopher, and thank you, Marianne, for bringing this fantastic group around this virtual table and for giving me the opportunity to share about my personal experience with Indigenous Identity Quest. Before going any further, please allow me to say I think it's important that I feel rather lucky to see what's happening right now with the rise of Indigenous rights and how they finally feel free to speak out. This is just as John Raston Soul points out in his book called The Comeback, where he also draws a funny but glaring parallel between this and the Quiet Revolution in Quebec. Interesting. My name is Isabelle Laurier. I will be presenting today, as you know now, with my co-host, Christopher Manfredi from Mcgill University. I will talk about the Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit exhibition and building partnerships for reconciliation through art, architecture, and traditional knowledge. This lecture will be presented in 3 parts: the Canadian High Arctic Research Station, the Pan-Canadian Inuit Art Competition, and the Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit Traveling Exhibition that led me to seek a partnership with Mcgill University. Before diving into the heart of this amazing journey, a short summary of who we are and what we do. EVOQ Architecture is a Canadian firm that has been working with Inuit and First Nations communities for over 40 years. These communities are spread all across Canada, as well as the Inuit Nunavut. For those of you who are not familiar with the Inuit Nunavut territory, it is the Arctic part of Canada, a huge territory where the extreme weather can reach as low as -65 Celsius, and where communities are remote and isolated, and most villages do not have road access. So in 2015, our firm received a mandate to design and build the Canadian High Arctic Research Station in Iqaluktuutiaq, Nunavut, Canada. Let's call this building the CHARS, that is it's better known. And from Montreal, Iqaluktuutiaq is a 2-day trip by plane. I'll show you a drone video of the CHARS in Iqaluktuutiaq, otherwise known as Cambridge Bay. We build community projects by working very closely with the Inuit. Therefore, self-esteem, sense of wellness, sense of well-being, and sense of pride become the output of the work for the Inuit communities. It's all about sustainable development as a values-driven approach. And this serves decolonization and reappropriation of culture. Iqaluktuutiaq is a hamlet located on Victoria Island in the Kitikmeot region of Nunavut. Iqaluktuutiaq means good fishing place. It has a population of 1,800 people, and the traditional language is Inuit, using the Latin alphabet rather than the syllabic writing system. On this bird's eye view photo, you can see the CHAR's campus here next to the hamlet of Iqaluktuutiaq. In 2007, Speech from the Throne sets out to strengthen Canada's global leadership in Arctic science and technology and year-round presence in the Arctic. 2008, the government's Science and Technology Innovation Council identifies the Arctic as an important foundation for Canada's Northern Strategy priorities. Those were exercising Canada's Arctic sovereignty, protecting Canada's environmental heritage, promoting social and economic development, improving and devolving Northern governance. The CHARS was built as part of Canada's Northern Strategy. As mandated in the Speech from the Throne, the CHARS is to be a world-class Arctic research station on a cutting edge of science and technology, demonstrating state-of-the-art design excellence that serves as a model for similar polar facilities around the world. The design of the CHARS constitutes a major breakaway from the old research station model in Arctic communities. The CHARS brings science and traditional Inuit knowledge to work together under one roof. The architecture, planning, and design of the station reflects and makes possible this new paradigm to ensure its complete integration into the existing community. You will see why this international, unique, cutting-edge research station is a knowledge-sharing center, a community gathering place, more than just a research center. Consultations with Inuit elders and various Inuit community groups took place way before we started to design the station. The knowledge of Iqaluktuutiaq hunters and elders was tapped into through the entire planning phase. During one of our first community brainstorming sessions, a resident, Sarah Jenke, asked, "How are you going to introduce Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit into the design of the CHARS?" Architecture is a powerful means of cultural expression. Both the process leading to the design and the design of the station itself are derived from a number of Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit principles, or if you prefer, that which has always been known by Inuit. The Inuit planning principle of free, open, interconnected spaces is used in the layout of the public spaces. The circular shaped hagik, or traditional communal igloo, used inside and outside, takes on both physical and symbolic presences. Even the haggis inspired us. During daytime, the copper-colored cladding is a nod to the host community, the Copper Inuit. While Charles will make an international statement on Canadian research in the Arctic, it will also be an architectural representation of Inuit culture. The design of the research attempts, together with the Inuit, to translate into built forms the Inuit way of doing things, not simply in the past, but as they have evolved over time. And this sets an example for ongoing development in other Canadian Arctic communities. John Amagoalik had this to say about the importance of transmission of Inuit culture. We must teach our children their mother tongue. We must teach them what they are and where they come from. We must teach them the values which have guided our society over the thousands of years. We must teach them the philosophies which go back beyond the memory of man. In summary, protection and promotion of cultural diversity through art and architecture is a responsible and powerful approach. Federal public institution buildings are not subject to the policy we have in the province of Quebec, what we call the 1% art integration program. But in this case, it was felt very important to include significant Inuit artworks into the building. Integrating Inuit artworks into architecture reinforces the expression of Inuit culture. We will look at how we use the Pan-Canadian Inuit Art Competition, a first in Canada's history, to integrate artworks into the CHAR's building, and later what led me to set up a partnership with McGill University. Incorporating Inuit artworks into the very built fabric of the CHARs supports and strengthens the narrative of the building's design. And, as I said before, it further reinforces the expression of Inuit culture. Drawings and a sculpture were selected following a competition that commissioned Inuit artists from all across Inuit Nunavut territory. Again, this was a first in the history of Canadian Inuit art world. So the artists were invited to submit works that would illustrate traditional Inuit knowledge, the Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit principles. The works speak to the theme, which was honoring the timeless creative genius of Inuit. The small-scale drawings submitted by the artists were digitally enlarged to the full scale of the building, so they could be integrated into the flooring and glazing panels of the various public areas of the main research building. The small-scale sculpture was also digitally enlarged to fill the space of the main entrance of the CHARs. Now, you may ask yourself, how did they manage to reach those artists spread all across Inuit Nunavut, to invite them to participate in the Pan-Canadian art competition? And how did they manage to explain the goals and objectives to the artists? This is probably the most intriguing, exciting, and funny part of this whole journey. In its early stages, it appeared that the competition would only be a slightly daunting communication exercise. As it turned out, it quickly morphed into a real saga, complete with manhunts and woman hunts, chance encounters, and numerous unexpected turns. In spite of the many common similarities shared by the Inuit of these various territories, there are a great deal of unique cultural tradition, regional dialects, and even languages, Inuktitut and Inuinaktun. English is the language of communication, but it is not their mother tongue, and it's not equally mastered by all. Even the simplest of English words may not convey the same meaning. How then did we bridge the cognitive distance and the cultural and linguistic divide and deal with the daunting geography? The architect's response to these issues and challenges was to develop a guidebook for the 23 Inuit artists invited to compete. This document describes in both words and images the purpose of the station, the architectural narrative, and the link proposed between the station, its architecture, and the artworks to be integrated. It was sent to the artists along with drawing sheets with templates drawn to scale for each area of the building where 2D or 3D artworks would be integrated. So 23 artists received emails and phone calls asking if they would be interested in taking part of an art competition for the chars. 11 artists received a letter confirming they had been officially chosen. Each of them received an information package by mail in a red tube. The red tube included a booklet that describes in detail the artworks that were expected. We were looking for drawings produced specifically for this art competition. And above and beyond that, their drawings had to match the different areas of the building using a specific color chart, etc., etc. The winning drawings were to be used to produce the final artwork that would, with their consent, be transformed into the very fabric, floor, or glass panels of the charts. Also included in the red tubes, plans that show the shape and size of those areas where artists need to produce drawings. Artists were invited to draw directly on those plans and return them back to Montreal. And finally, prepaid shipping labels for the return of drawings to Montreal. Drawings were to be shipped back in the same red tube. Each artist would send me an email along with the waybill number so I could track the parcel from my end. Once received in Montreal, artworks were presented to a jury. The artworks submitted were judged according to their artistic merit, as well as how they expressed the theme, honoring the timeless creative genius of the Inuit. Let me now introduce the 7 artists who won the competition and show you their winning drawings that were incorporated into the chars. For this presentation, I asked the mayor of Iqaluktuutiaq, Pam Gross, a friend of mine, to lend her voice. In addition, I'll briefly show you some images of the transformation process, graphic control, vectorization, and digitalization of the artwork from the original drawing to the final result integrated into the building.
Drum dancers. Sami Iqaluktuutiaq is an established artist and arts administrator who brings extensive experience to the Inuit Art Foundation. Well known for his drawing, painting, and sculpting, Iqaluktuutiaq is recognized as an innovative creator who is redefining Inuit art. Originally from Nunavut, Sami Iqaluktuutiaq is the liaison officer for the Amalgavik Nunavut Art Secretariat in Qaujimajatuqangit that supports Nunavut artists in all media. Iqaluktuutiaq explains he selected this theme, drum dancers, for my submission to the CHARS art contest, along with drawings about the Iqaluktuutiaq mute culture. The drum dancers stand out as a very unique representation of Kitikmeot society in that part of the Inuit Nunavut. When I drew the dancers, I could hear them very loudly and imagine the strong cultural connection to their past and heritage. That's why I chose to draw them in my art submissions. Every time I watch and hear the drum dancers perform, it makes me want to dance with them. Iqaluktuutiaq, Inuit Legends. Born in 1963, Iqaluktuutiaq is an almost fully self-taught artist. She is probably the most well-known of King Knight Studios in Cape Dorset. Her work denotes a clear interest in design, the creation of patterns, and the fascinating relation between abstraction and representation. Since her first participation in Cape Dorset's annual print collection in 2004, she has presented her prints and drawings at many solo exhibitions in various renowned museums and galleries. Her in-depth knowledge of Inuit lore, her commitment to the deception of contemporary northern realities make her works some of the most sought after by art collectors. TV's drawings reveal a focused, introspective mind, one that bridges a space between two worlds, the westernized world of the modern Inuit and the vibrant world of the myths and legends that transcend generations. Her decisive, unwavering lines reveal a thorough knowledge of her subjects, while the flattened perspectives speak an interest in creating more than mere facsimile, unveiling the underlying truths within Inuit legends. Timoti, Tim Pitsiulak, beluga whales and a bowhead. Pitsiulak was based in Cape Dorset, Nunavut, where he worked as a hunter while making jewelry, sculptures, lithographs, photographs, and large colored pencil drawings, the last of which he is best known for. His favorite subjects were Arctic wildlife and scenery, a traditional and modern Inuit culture. His work is presented in private collections and is still shown in galleries. In 2013, the Royal Canadian Mint featured a Pitsiulak drawing of two beluga whales and a bowhead whale on Canada's 25-cent coin. His work combined traditional motifs with contemporary techniques. Tim was a hunter, and his respect for the natural world and its wildlife was fundamental to his artistic sensibility. Tim was particularly inspired by the whales that frequent the cold Arctic waters, the beluga whale and the bowhead, because, as he would say, nobody really knows much about them. The bowhead in particular is a majestic and mysterious creature, and frequently he would embellish his drawings of these animals with tattoos of ancient artifacts. Bobby Iqaluktuutiaq Anaviluk, Survival and Improvisation. Bobby Iqaluktuutiaq Anaviluk was raised on the land, moving between camps by dog sled. It was at this time that the artistic spark was being lit by his parents, who were both respected artists. He learned to draw by using flat stones as tablets to create scenes or depict animals. Once paper was available to him, he further developed his drawing skills. A lifetime of hard work and perseverance transformed his artistic talents into sculptures and drawings that are fluid in their movement, yet full of raw, visceral energy. Anaviluk describes, we hunted caribou year-round, sometimes using Inuit to indicate where caribou migrations would pass and also to locate ourselves within space and provide us with a sense of direction for travel. Seal was primarily used for its blubber, a thick layer of fat, which would be burned into an oil on kulla. Its fur used to make clothing, its hide used for the transportation of goods and equipment. Before sleds were made with man-made materials like those used today, the sled runners or adliak or kamutik would be made from fish, lined lengthwise and well wrapped in seal hide, then placed back into the water and finally pulled out so the entire object could freeze. There were two parts of the sled runners that slide on ice or snow, the second one being caribou antlers. These would be tied in parallel to the frozen fish wrapped in hide. Iqaluktuutiaq, animals becoming human. Born in Iqaluktuutiaq, Iqaluktuutiaq has been living in Qaujimajatuqangit, which is the biggest community in Ungava, for the past 10 years. She has been interested in art since childhood and made her first drawings when she was 9 years old. As a self-taught artist, she used black pigment ink for her drawings with a touch of color to highlight her creations. She also uses acrylic paint, oil paint, and uses the techniques of glass painting and stencil on canvas. Iqaluktuutiaq describes, in Inuit legends, many stories are told about animals becoming humans or vice versa. The legends were considered as spirits living on the land and among Inuit. A lot of these stories have different meanings. For example, Ananok, or polar bear, becoming human after being chased by humans. He ran away to the beach and spoke like an Inuk and then embarked on a kayak, seal skin boat. This is something I grew up with, listening to these kinds of stories. The legends live on in our stories, up in this generation. It is they that inspired me in my drawings. Victoria Gray, spearhead and drum. Victoria Gray made her first sculpture when she was 14. Her mother had taught her how to sew at a young age, and when she was able to make her tapestries. Her biological father, Joseph Ungma Sr., was a well-known carver from the 50s to the 80s. Victoria Gray, during her career, was privileged to work with famous print masters in Cape Dorset, Nunavut, as well as having the chance to travel internationally. Inspired by fauna and flora, she seeks simple and elegant shapes with rare colors. Often the repetition of a motif plays a strategic pictorial role to infuse motion into her picturesque scenes. The Iqaluktuutiaq is still used today and is used as a traditional hunting tool. Iqaluktuutiaq is used in Qalgik, a traditional communal igloo, at the heart of the igloo cluster. Today, these are still very much the main meeting places. Qaujimajatuq, Kuzi, Sapa, Curly, Elder, and Polar Bear. I usually use power tools in my work, but made this carving with only chisels, files, sandpaper, and patience. It was with patience that my grandfather, Kakak Ashuna, taught me carving at a young age. When I carve, I think of my grandfather and the ancestors that came before him. Through carving, I honor them by following their teachings and their respect for Arctic animals and ways of life. This carving is about elders and how they guide us with their knowledge. Science is not new to the Arctic. It began long ago, with Inuit ancestors observing the world and sharing their thoughts with younger generations. Today, modern technology and universities are the popular images associated with science and learning, but it is our elders who continue to urge Inuit knowledge forward, guiding the powerful force of our culture, like the elder in my carving leads her bear.
So, briefly about the graphic processing of the drawings. Sami Kudluk artworks, the drum dancer. As you can see here, Sami used our color chart with pencils. And this is after the whole transformation process, the graphic control, vectorization, and digitalization of the artwork. So you see here a picture of the drawing integrated into the very fabric of the chars, where I'm sitting with the elders. As I explained, the water jet technical that we use to cut into the flooring material. Iqaluktuutiaq's artwork, this wonderful detailed drawing, was transformed into a huge glass panel after the transformation process. Tempitualak's bowhead whale is situated in another public space near the labs. As you can see here, Tim ran out of time to apply our color chart on his drawings. So here you see I proposed him 6 different options with one I secretly preferred. And surprisingly, he chose my favorite one. Sadly, Tim passed away a couple months later. It was probably his last major piece of work. Here you can see the craftsman Gilbert with the main architect. Water jet technology was used to cut through the flooring material to recreate the enlarged bowhead. In memory of Tim, please take a few seconds to admire his bowhead whale. This small black and white drawing I received became this gigantic and magnificent mosaic. Bobby and Avilok's artwork for the public space entrance flooring. Just like Tim, here, his drawing came to me in black and white. In other words, he didn't have time to put color on. If I remember correctly, it was the hunting season. So from the color chart, I chose to apply the color on his drawings for him with his consent, of course. And here, same transformation process, graphic control, vectorization, digitalization of the artwork, and then the water jet technology to cut into the flooring material. And the result, you can see, well, you can see a tiny part of the flooring. It's a huge scale, integrated into the very fabric. Iqaluktuutiaq's artwork was a series of drawings that were applied on the privacy panels of each office. Victoria Gray's artwork, showing the theme of the art competition, honoring the timeless creative genius of the Inuit. Her drawings were placed on glass panels as safety strips. And finally, Cozy Curly's carving, the only 3D artwork of the competition. You can see here our craftsman Jules Lassalle enlarging the carving, and this is here once installed in the entrance of the Charles building. This 6-inch bear grew into a 6-foot bear. The elder leads her bear and is also guiding us all. This brief overview alludes to the process and roller coaster ride that led from the first discussions with the community elders to the first contact with the artists, all the way up to the art installed in the building. This whole process, the Pan-Canadian Inuit Art Competition, the art integration into the building were also part of the Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit principles. But this story was not meant to be an exhibition, even less so a traveling exhibition. Inuit Qaujimajatuqangit art, architecture, and traditional knowledge is now a traveling exhibition retracing the steps or telling the story of the art integration process at the Canadian Arctic Research Station, the CHARS. It is comprised of 1 sculpture, 45 drawings, and many information panels. You will see an overview of the exhibition corpus, a short video with throat singers on the background. The first exhibition was launched in September 2017 at La Guilde in Montreal. It was meant to be displayed 3 months and finally stayed on for a 1.5 years. This is when Christopher first saw the exhibition. It was then displayed at Le Centre National d'Exposition in Saguenay, Quebec from January to April 2019, where I gave a short talk to an enthusiastic audience. It was later shown during the Inuit Studies Conference in Montreal in October 2019, followed by a lecture as well. As a result of that, soon after, I was invited to present a conference about the IQ exhibition at the Arctic Art Summit in Rovaniemi, Finland. During the summit, I was struck by how much interest this topic drew. In fact, someone suggested I meet the Canadian ambassador in Reykjavik and show her the exhibition. She thought she might be interested. This exhibition proved to be part of the ambassador's personal interest and mission. Bring international exposure to the extraordinary skill and creative vision of Canadian Indigenous artists. Back in Montreal, aware of the growing commitment of Canadian universities to indigenize their campuses, I spontaneously chose the best university I knew. Following up on the exhibition at Mcgill, I contacted Christopher Manfredi to talk about a possible partnership between EVOQ Architecture and Mcgill. The partnership grew quickly. Together, we participated in the Arctic Circle Assembly by presenting the IQ exhibition in the prestigious Harpa Center in October 2019. It became a truly traveling exhibition. A couple months later, we set up the IQ exhibition at University of Iceland in January 2020. Christopher and I took part to a panel discussion on designing a culturally appropriate building with the Inuit communities. So in September 2019, McGill University partnered with EVOQ to support the global distribution of the exhibition. It highlights the way in which art installations can coexist with scientific research facilities. Moreover, the exhibition shows the importance of recognizing and making space for Indigenous knowledge within the research paradigms underlying facilities like the CHARs. And now, back over to Christopher for some final words.
Well, thank you very much, Isabelle. I hope everyone gets a sense of the three compelling stories that the IQ art exhibition tells. And I'm very pleased to let everyone know that in 2 weeks, McGill will be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the signing of our charter, creating the university, which launches our 3rd century celebrations. And as part of our 3rd century celebrations, the IQ exhibit will be on display at McGill University for several months. We all hope that conditions will be such that many people can come and visit it, even if they have to visit it under pandemic conditions of social distancing and so on. So I want to thank Isabelle for bringing this to my attention, and thank Marianne for giving us the opportunity to speak not only about how McGill is pursuing reconciliation through physical representation and symbolic recognition, but also about how we're working to bring this tremendous story of the integration of traditional knowledge and traditional art into a major world-class modern research facility. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Provost Manfredi and Isabelle Laurier. And thank you to all the participants and presenters in this roundtable on Inuit traditional knowledge. The presentation showed, I hope, the role of traditional knowledge, or IQ, in our times, which is already acknowledged by many, but not by all. Before the event, when invitations went out, I received several somewhat rude emails from well-known scientists who indicated that IQ was a ruse dreamt up by the Inuit in order to gain political influence or extra funding from government. I think the presentations convincingly showed that this is not the case, as some of this knowledge has been around for 4,000 years or more, not something invented by radical Inuit activists. As Daley Sambo Durrow pointed out, IQ is encouraged and protected in several international conventions, respecting and honoring this knowledge and thereby showing us all a way forward to reconciliation. Deriding traditional knowledge may be seen as another instance of colonialism, because Inuit traditional knowledge decolonializes knowledge as it is and was created by Inuit on their premises and from their perspective. This is true not only of Inuit traditional knowledge, but of the knowledge systems of other Indigenous peoples. We hope that you have enjoyed the presentations and maybe even learned something from them. Thank you very much for participating. Merci. Hoyanak Nakumik.